today's lesson is lesson 2 about the spreading of Islam. So, after Muhammad died in AD 632, he unfortunately did not leave instructions about who should be the next leader. Now, remember, he was a prophet, right? The starter of the religion. And so he was like a religious leader and he was also like a political leader. So everyone believed that, there wasn't another prophet, but there still needs someone to, carry on. So they decided to have a new leader called a caliph, okay? And the first 4 caliphs ended up all being people very close to Muhammad, either relatives and very close friends. And that was done on purpose to try to keep it, as close as the religion as possible to the original, right, to Muhammad's teachings. So this kept going, and remember, Muhammad had also been thinking it's important to spread the religion. He was a good military leader. So they kept that going, and so they kept conquering new places and built up a pretty big empire, and so it starts being called the Arab Empire because, right, these Muslims had been from the Arab Peninsula, okay? Even though the Arab Empire stretches farther than that, right? It's all of Southwest Asia and even into Northeast Africa. All right, so these keep going, and then a new group of caliphs took over called the Umayyads. And the Umayyads actually make Damascus, which is a city in Syria, their capital, and they rule from there, and they do even more to keep that going of expanding and getting more land in Asia and in Africa, and of course the side effect being that it's spreading the religion as well. Okay. Why are they so successful in making this big empire? Well, remember, originally they were nomads, and originally different tribes fighting against each other, and they were very good warriors already, and horse riders, and so they took those skills now, and that makes them have good soldiers, and they are able to win, and get a lot of land. Plus, there was the idea that it is like their duty to spread their religion, so they're fighting hard to go and feel like they have a religious reason to fight. Okay. One of the other reasons that might have made it a little bit easier for them is that the other people that they were fighting against, the major empires, right, are the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. And so those two, both when they conquered people, they insisted that people convert to their religion, right? They had one official religion, and they were pretty mean to the other ones who refused, right, or resisted. And so the Muslims, when they came in and took over, a lot of people didn't fight as much because it was better than like the Persians, let's say, right? Because at least the Muslims were more open-minded, and they usually did let the conquered people still practice their own religion. They are especially, right, we know that they have a lot of similarities with Christians and Jews. Right? They believed in the one true God, and they follow a lot of the same ideas and writings and prophets, right? So they're so similar. It was very easy to allow them. It just doesn't seem to hurt them, right? And so they were pretty respectful and nice about it. And so their empire grows even bigger, and of course, then they're also going to spread their religion. And their language, which is Arabic, right? So over time, then this empire getting so big that the word Arab actually changes. It doesn't mean just a person who lives in Arabia, right, or the peninsula. Now it means people who speak Arabic. So it's a difference in the term, what it's meaning over time. All right, so now your book wants to say, like, oh, look at the book at the empire also ends up coming into Spain. So you can see how it kind of moved west across Africa and then up north to Spain. And they have a lot of influence in Spain as well. The city of Cordoba becomes a major city of learning for the Islamic faith. A lot of there was a lot of learning going on, and because they are tolerant, a lot of different cultures are interacting together and spreading their ideas. Okay, and so your book starts telling you about some of the more famous ones. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these famous people. I think the bigger picture here is that because they were tolerant and people felt comfortable, many different faiths sent their thinkers to go, work and congregate in Spain. And so Spain becomes the center of learning and philosophy. And a lot of things are translated between the different religions, languages, right, from Arabic and Latin. And so that spreads ideas to other areas and people can read it, right? All right, and so the other thing that's helping the spread of Islam is not only the conquering, right, with the armies, but also people are going around and usually preaching their religion and going on the trade routes, right? So merchants are bringing their religion, like we've talked about before in other places, right? Indonesia, which is nowhere near the original starting place of this religion, right? But Indonesia today has more Muslims than anywhere else in the world, which just shows that, right, things spread on usually trade routes, okay? And then here they even mention place. Have you heard of Timbuktu before? Timbuktu, usually people say it when they mean it's like a really far away place. Well, it was in Africa. And so this is showing that, Islam became, or the Muslim religion, right, became very entrenched in Africa because of these merchants going on the trade routes, okay? All right, and so now we're going to talk about the fact that there is not just one type of Muslim. There are actually two types. They kind of separated. They originally were one, but then they were arguing about who should take over after Muhammad. And there was a big argument about who is the rightful heir, the rightful caliph. And basically, this division never changed. It's still, they're separated, and there's a lot of bad feelings between them, even though like the main parts of the religion are all the same. The Sunni and the Shia, okay? Shia are always the minority in most places, or overall, but they do make up a lot in Iran and Iraq, okay? All right, so Shia, the issue they were having is the Shia thought, the minority, right, thought that Muhammad's son-in-law should take over. His name is Ali. And then they thought all the future ones should be his descendants. Okay? And so because they disagreed, they did not believe that the following descendants, right, like the Umayyad caliphs, they didn't think they had any right to rule, okay, because they thought they were on like the wrong side. Now the Sunni, who are the majority, they thought that the Umayyads were the rightful heirs, and there was a big disagreement. And so what ends up happening is they forever are going to, separate. And even though their main tenets are the same, but they do develop a few different practices over time as they're divided. But otherwise, they're both Muslim, okay? All right, and then we need to talk about, after a while, of course, some people are starting to get unsatisfied. That would be people that were Muslim, but they weren't the, Arab Muslims. They were from people that had been conquered, And they started getting unhappy because the Umayyads, they allowed the Muslims that were Arab to get better things, better jobs. They didn't have to pay as high taxes. And so there was a lot of discontent going on, especially in the places where there were more Shias, right? And the majority the rulers are usually Sunni. So the areas where there are more Shias are the Mesopotamian area and the Persia. And so they end up rebelling, the Shia Muslims, and they overthrow the Umayyads and they make their own dynasty called the Abbasids. Okay? And the Abbasids ruled from Baghdad. Okay? And so you can see on the map, Baghdad is a center of the empire, and it becomes very big and prosperous. It's on a major trade route. And so there's a golden age during this Abbasid rule. And especially, we talked about golden ages several times, right? The Persian Empire is they're appreciating a lot of their culture, and they bring a lot of that more influence into the Arab way of life. So that's where we see a lot of that start to happen in this later time period. Okay, and then over time, though, right, the Abbasids find it difficult to rule a big empire, and they start losing power, and people start breaking off. Like, for example, in Egypt and Spain and the farther places, they started, kind of ruling themselves, having their own caliphs. In Persia, that outside there, right, they start also getting taken over by some outside people. And so pretty soon, the Abbasids are not ruling very much. It's basically just the area around Baghdad. So the Turks come in, okay, the Seljuk Turks. And they move in, they're nomads and great warriors, and they take control by force. They take over Baghdad. And they actually allow the Abbasid caliphs to stay, but only as religious rulers. And they are going to, the Seljuk Turks are going to rule like the government, right? So the ruler is the Sultan, right? And for about 200 years, it works like that the Sultan, the Turk Sultan rules, and the Abbasid caliphs are the religious rulers only. Okay? And then around 1200, a little later, the Mongols came in. And this is where, Crash Course loves to talk about the Mongols. So the Mongols come in, and of course, they take over Baghdad and they ruin it. They burn all the buildings. They kill so many people, like 50,000 people. And that's the end of the Arab Empire. Okay. Now, your book does an interesting thing. They said even after the empire ends, there are some other empires that have this Muslim faith. Okay, so I want you to know that it doesn't completely end, and that's why the Muslim religion is going to, Islam is going to keep going. Okay, so they summarize it first, and then they talk about each one. So the Ottoman Empire, the Safavids, and the Mughals. So we'll talk about each one. Okay, so first, the Ottoman Turks. There is a new Turkish group that comes in. Their leader was Osman, and so the Ottoman Empire is named after him. And he and the Ottomans go and they conquer the Byzantine Empire. Okay. And remember how we talked about Byzantine Empire and how it had Constantinople as the capital? Well, they actually eventually decide to rename Constantinople to what it is nowadays, which is Istanbul. And that was the ruler Mehmet II, who is the one who came in and took the capital and made it, their own. Okay. All right. They also made the empire large again, right? So they went all the way into southeastern Europe, southwestern Asia, North Africa again, and even a lot of the Mediterranean. Okay, so they made it really big. The Ottoman Empire was quite large. The leader is called a sultan, just like before when we talked about the Seljuk Turks. And then one of the most famous was Suleiman the First. And he was called the lawgiver because he tried to organize their laws better, and he did a lot for the people. He built a lot of schools and mosques throughout. So he was one of the more famous sultans. Okay. The book, by the way, just mentions here about some of the architecture and how beautiful it is. And I do love, I think Islamic architecture is really beautiful. So, all right. And then, let's see. So Islam, of course, becomes really large again because the Ottomans ruled such a big area. And again, they did often let people have their other religions, but there were definitely advantages to being Muslim. You had better tax rates. The government had different rules if you were Muslim or not Muslim. So even though you were free to rule your own, a lot of times people would convert, to get the advantages. All right, so eventually, this empire too is going to lose its power, and then we're going to switch over and talk about another Muslim empire, and this was the Safavids, and they were led by a guy named Ishmael, and he was from Persia. Okay, so he's the king in a Persian country is called a Shah, and so he rules Persia for quite a long time, and his future dynasty does. And they're just trying to say that the reason this is important is because it's a Muslim empire, and you can see how it's mixing with the Persian culture, right? One of the things that we have still today is Urdu, which is a language which has got a lot of the Persian influence there. All right, and then the next one is the Mughals. Now be careful. This is different than the Mongols, okay? The Mughals are a Muslim empire in India, okay? It was Akbar was the person who started it. He also, in his later rulers, he was very open to letting people practice their religions. The later rulers were not quite so nice. In fact, they kind of picked on two of the others, Hindus, which we've talked about before, right? And Sikhs. We haven't talked about Sikhs too much, but Sikhism, which is very similar. Like there's one God, right? And it is a pretty large, we don't hear about it as much in America. These are the people that like never cut their hair, the men, right? And they wear it up in a turban, and it's very long. You've probably maybe seen a Sikh. It's the fifth and largest in the world, but we don't talk about it quite as much here in America.